So good evening. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and welcome to a long-awaited comeback of the Uplifting Voices. This is a podcast that I began during the pandemic to hear particularly from leaders of color and people that often do not have a voice to talk about their lives, to talk about their work. And I'm especially excited tonight to bring back the Uplifting podcast with my guest, Tawana Bowles, who is a community activist based in Boston, someone who is the founder of Not Your Normal Conversations podcast, and right now is completing a bachelor's degree in pre-law and political science at Liberty University. And I know that she will become an attorney, which I'm very excited about. And I met Tawana at the grand opening of the New Beginnings Reentry House for formerly incarcerated women, and just immediately had a connection. And Tawana, thank you so much for having me on your podcast a couple months back. And I think I said then that I wanted to invite you onto my podcast. So welcome, and how are you doing? It's great to see you again.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate you. And I definitely probably look better than I feel, but I'm just grateful to be here. I think the one thing that always drives me is helping somebody else. I never want people to experience anything that I've experienced in their life, or maybe even after incarceration. As you know, when I first met you, you're such a transparent senator that it was very easy to open up to you. And I felt like I told you my whole life story before I even got to hand you my book, which will be out the first week of September. And, you know, I was very honest because I felt like you were a person who would fight for the community. And I am a part of the community. I never thought, you know, that what they call formerly incarcerated or what they call inmates were a part of the community. We were always the outcasts. Even when we were on the inside, we were the outcasts, but when we came home, we were also outcasts as well. I appreciate you just taking the time and being as down to earth to speak to not just me, but everybody. It seemed like everybody knew you, like you were the uncle invited to the cookout, and they kept saying your name, kind of like shying away, and know a couple of things, that you weren't doing this for show, and that you weren't interested in them saying your name. You were just interested in doing the work, like myself. I'm sure my name has been said in many rooms, but I think at the end of the day, what's most important to me is the work that I'm doing to help save people's lives. And I think that you and I can both agree that that is the reason why we do this work.
Absolutely. And I saw you doing the work when we first met at the New Beginnings house, and was just so impressed with your willingness to tell your story and to be open. And I guess to begin there, if you know, I'm always curious when I meet new people, including those who've, you know, gone through the system. Where did you grow up, and what was life like growing up? If you could share that with us.
Sure. You know, I think it would take forever for me to explain where I came from as opposed to where I am today. But more importantly, I grew up in Boston, and I grew up to two parents that were married very young. My mom was 16. I think my father was probably about 19, and they got married because she was pregnant, and they had my sister. And then here I came a while after, and things from what I can recall were good until, you know, my mom was a nursing assistant and she started to do drugs and things started to fall apart. But little did I know, behind the scenes, they were already falling apart for my parents. They were young. They were forced to be married back in those days. To have kids, you couldn't have kids out of wedlock. So, you know, my sister and I were two parents that technically were married, but it was like the blind leading the blind. You know, I remember my sister and I being home for, it had to be almost 2 weeks, you know, with nothing. And we lived in the projects. We lived in Franklin Hill Projects at 6 Shannon Road on the top floor. And I'll never forget, you know, my grandfather and this white woman with a big afro coming to the door and telling us that we had to leave. And I just remember at that moment, no matter how I was feeling, no matter, you know, my sister and I have always been very close, and she's always been like a mom to me. But, you know, to say that I didn't want to betray my mother, the first woman I ever loved, was an understatement, because I was hungry. I was tired and I was enticed by food, but I really didn't want to go. And I struggled with that. I'll never forget what graffiti was on the wall as we're walking down. It was the last time I ever saw the apartment, the hallways. And from there, it was group homes and foster homes. But the first foster home that I ever entered was the one woman who wanted nothing but to love me. And she didn't want money from the state. It was my grandfather, who's deceased now. It was his girlfriend at the time. And
Okay.
she put him out and kept me. And so there I was.
And so you were growing up part of the foster care system, is that correct?
From the age of 5 until I got kicked out of DCF for assaulting my social worker when I was 16.
And so, I mean, when you look back now, what were the things that, if you had had better support, or where do you think you could have gotten better support to sort of change those early years?
I don't think that it was really the support. I think the first foster home that I went to, I said it was my grandfather's girlfriend. She loved us. And because I didn't know what love looked like, I rejected it. And she kept us around for 8 years and wanted to adopt us, but her health was failing because we were failing her as the people that my sister and I were her daughters, and she never called us foster kids. And that wasn't a thing in her house. We went to dance school. We learned how to play the piano. We went to school. We never went to school dirty or hungry. We said our prayers. We went to church. We went to, Bible classes. She really did love us. And I think that because I wasn't receptive and because my family was still around, like we got to visit them, I in the background there, she's not your mother. You don't have to listen to her. And so I started to behave as such. And she gave us away.
I'm so sorry about that. And as I think you said then, was it the DYS system or DCF, or what happened next?
I stayed in DCF and I went to another foster home.
Okay.
I wasn't there very long, but I remember my foster brother thinking that I wasn't his foster sister, and he always wanted to touch and prod, and he was older. That was a point where I recognized that I really had no control over what was going to happen to me, how I would feel, how it would make me feel. And so I pretty much at that time became numb, and I just stopped saying what was happening to me. If anything bad happened to me, I never talked about it. From group homes to foster homes, I was in them all except for DYS.
And so what, I mean, if you had a comment on DYS or DCF, what are the things that you think need to be changed there, if anything? Everything. Yeah.
I believe that DCF is so bogged down with cases. I've been trying to get a supervisor from over there to be on my podcast. They must have looked me up and figured out, oh, we're definitely not going on. I think that I have been incarcerated with women who have killed foster kids, and I have been in foster homes where I have been molested. I've been beaten pretty bad. And even if I said anything, I wasn't taken out of those homes. So therefore, I feel like the system will continue to fail every child that goes into the system until they get it right, until they recognize that this is not just a system. It's a place where kids go to get nurture and maybe a loving family, and that never happens. My first foster home was the first woman that I've ever seen as a foster mother that just loved us without condition. And so I think DCF has a lot of work to do. I've seen a lot of kids die in DCF. I've been incarcerated with women who have killed children that they've had as foster kids. And I have to say that to watch that could have been me. I think that the caseworkers are coming in younger and younger. And so they're just trying to put them anywhere, and they don't really listen to the kids have voices. We're just not heard. And I feel like DCF needs a lot of training, extensive training.
Okay.
A lot of kids come from abuse, from parents who are drug addicts. You can't just take them and just throw them anywhere without thinking about their mental health and what's going to work for them. Being in another foster home, is the foster mother kind? I've been in foster homes where they chained the refrigerator shut after a certain time and said, you can't eat, only my kids can.
My goodness. And so part of is it better vetting of foster parents? Is that part of the problem too, or the motivations of some foster parents?
Yes, it's all of the above. It's the
Okay.
social workers and it is the foster parents. I think it's a combination of them both. I think this world is fueled by money, and just like in the jails, you go into jail. I'm a dollar sign to them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And so, now you're doing all this great positive work, and I'm just sort of curious, sort of what motivates you, and how is it to really be out there now in the community, having a positive impact, using your lived experiences to really change people's lives. What is that like, and what is the work that you're doing now?
Well, I
Broad question, sorry.
no worries. When I came home, I pretty much hit the ground running. I got right into school. I got a job. I looked for my own place, and I ended up out here in Whitman. My daughter came to live with me, and she's 22 now, and she was having her own experience that I had to support her through. And prior to me coming home, the one thing that I could think about was that I was so tired of myself, and I had failed myself in so many ways. If nothing else, I think that we think about all the wrong things when we're inside, like I'm going to disappoint my kids, and I'm going to disappoint my fiance or my husband or my mom or my dad. Well, we have to look past that and look. If you don't love yourself, you're never going to be able to give somebody that component of love that you have for yourself. And so for my daughter, she had me off and on in her life. So for her to come and live with me, it was a new experience, but I knew that I had to fight hard for her. But more importantly for me, because I wanted this. So I went to school, and initially I said, I want to be a defense attorney. I had interviewed Rachel Rollins on the show, and she was kind of pushing me towards being a DA. She thought I would be great for it because you have more power and you have a system backing you. And I remember going up against the Commonwealth, and no, thank you. Yeah, they lie.
Yep.
And sometimes they don't care. Not everybody is a Rachel Rollins. Shout out to her. She was. And when I told her that her office had given me my 5-year sentence, which was the most time I had done, she apologized, and she wasn't even sitting when it happened. So I knew that it was at that time that I didn't want to represent adults, because not that adults are behaving. If I can catch a child at the age that I was at to help them, and although a lot of people see me and they say, oh, you don't look like you've been through anything. And that's the thing that I want to give you. I want to tell you that I have been through something, but I want to stop you where you're at. I don't want you to end up in adult court. I don't want you to end up in adult prison. And if I can avoid that for you, I'm going to fight 10 times harder, because I have lived experience. It isn't even because I know the law. I know what happens to children when they're neglected, when they're abused, when they're not loved, when they're not treated well. I know that. I know how it is to go to bed hungry. I know those things. And I don't want that for any child, anywhere.
Absolutely. And now you're able to make a difference, which I do think is empowering. Do you feel more empowered now?
I wouldn't say empowered. I think that sometimes that's such a term that people let go to their head.
Yeah.
I'm very humble.
Generic, right?
It is very generic, and I don't want to be a person that's in a room and then, I had somebody walk up to me in the grocery store a month back. I was like, aren't you that girl that does the podcast? And I almost wanted to be like, no, only because I don't. Yes, a girl that does the podcast, or that I'm not doing this because I want to be a news reporter. I'm giving you information. I'm letting you know who's going to be running for Senate, or who's going to be running for governor, or whatever it is, so we can make mindful decisions that are going to affect our children, or are going to affect us in our communities. It's more important. We want to change the laws. Prison is not for everybody, Senator. I told you that.
Yeah.
I've been mentally in prison my whole life.
And on the prison front, and would be interested to talk about whatever you'd like to share at this moment right now in the legislature. You talk about legislative change. We're right on the precipice of passing a prison moratorium legislation to ban the construction of a new prison for the next 5 years. And one of the things I've been talking to a lot of my colleagues is how in so many ways prison is not a place for rehabilitation. If you're willing to, can you talk a little bit, whether about your perspective on prisons or your experience during incarceration?
My first incarceration, as I shared with you when we met at the event, I think that I, again, was pretty transparent, and not
Mhm.
because I thought that you could change anything at that moment, but because I wanted you to know that this is what happens. I don't, again, look like what they call a normal inmate. And honestly, I don't know what that looks like. I broke bread with a lot of women that I'm friends with to this day, and I don't know what that looks like. I do know that to officers, I look like a normal female on the street, and it's easy to, whatever you call it, be attracted to me or like me or abuse your power in that way. I was sexually assaulted my first time being in prison, and when I came home, we were both indicted out of the same court, and he served 9 months while I was doing a 5-year sentence.
Oh my God, that's horrible. That's horrible.
If you want to talk about changing in the legislation and what we could do to change, I'm looking to actually write a law. And Liz Miranda is good at writing laws.
Yeah.
And I love her. And I think that she's a very smart and witty person. And I think that she is very down to earth. And I did have her on the show. And I want to talk to her about changing the laws for officers who sexually assault inmates. I don't care. Every test, I've seen them myself. Even if I said yes, it means no. You are never supposed to abuse your power. And when they do that, I think there should be mandatory sentencing. I do not think that they should get off that easy. I do not think that you should be able to judge shop. You knew the law better than I. You knew the law better than I did, and you decided to do what you did, not just to me, but there were 6 other victims. I ended up testifying in federal court because of one of the victims was suing the state, and she won. I was incarcerated when I testified for her, but reliving that for me, because I was his first victim, was a lot. And I don't think anybody should have to experience that, especially because I've been sexually assaulted as a kid. So I go to jail, I'm supposed to be doing my time, and yet I'm physically assaulted, and now I have something else going on in my mental. And I think a law should be passed where any officer who does this should go to prison. I don't think that they should have the right to lobby a case. I don't have the right to do that sometimes. There's been judges who have been nice enough to hear what has happened to me in the past, but I don't think officers should get off that easy. I'm talking about police officers and correction officers who abuse their power, especially towards women.
Yeah, and we've created an accountability commission for police officers. There's a commission to look at correction officers. So there are things we're taking a look at. Yep.
And I appreciate that. I think that, it's always safe to say that wasn't the thing that, made me spiral out of control. I think that I was already out of control. I mean, that's the reason why I went to prison to begin with. I didn't have any self-control. I was very impulsive, and I was very angry. I was very passive aggressive. So the things that I saw in prison, I saw women commit suicide, try to commit suicide, lots of fights, lots of things that I saw that maybe I wouldn't have seen had I been on the outside. But it definitely messes with your mental. Being in prison, if you already have mental health issues, is not the place for anybody to be. And I can attest that the officers don't make it any easier. I think that a lot of times, we misunderstand our role in the system. If you're an officer, you don't have to call me a crackhead or a dope fiend. I'm not that.
Exactly.
Those are not even words you should use towards anybody, even if they are. But more importantly, what do you think that does to my self-esteem and me as a woman and as a mother? And, I remember Mother's Days in there where they would say, why are you even celebrating Mother's Day? You don't even take care of your kids. Those are the things dealt with on the inside. It's, to me, I think that it did a lot of damage to my self-esteem and just me as a person. I questioned who I really was.
Sure. And aside from that piece, which I completely agree with, what was your experience with, education, with training, with workforce development, learning skills? What was that like?
Well, I have to say this, people liked me. I always was respectful. I don't
Oh, yes.
how I always ended up in jail. And I definitely wasn't what they call a good criminal. I always got caught. But I think that there was people who respected me. There were a lot of officers, the superintendent, they held me at high regards. And I can't say that they trusted me, but they would ask me if I wanted to join programs or do like Beyond Scared Straight. There were a lot of things that they were asking me to do. And I don't think it was because they thought the most of me. My look attracted people to me because they said I don't look like the normal inmate. So when you bring people in for tours, can you speak to these people? I sound articulate. But I think that they needed to let people see everybody, to see what it's really like. It's like a melting pot in there. And you'll find that, I did do a lot of programs. I did a lot of programs because I had a good time. I actually went to BU before I left this time, and it wasn't for the good time. It was because it was my time. It was my time to do something different. It was my time to set the record straight for me. I knew I had more to offer the world, and I had a lifer come up to me and say, no disrespect, I'm here for the rest of my life until something changes. And something changed. But prior to that, she said, we don't want you here anymore. Why don't you go out and help us get out of here? Because you can do more on the outside than you can on the inside. And something clicked. It was already clicking, but when she said that, I was like, you know what? She's right. I've wasted 14 years of my life on an installment plan, giving it to the DOC or the county.
Right. So that one person really had an impact on you?
Well, she did. And to this day, I have a lot of respect and I support her greatly. But, shout out to Angie Jefferson. I feel like her being so hard on me, I always thought she was mean to me. Sometimes she liked me, but she was mean. And I was like, this lady, did she like me or not? She was pushing me out the door so that I didn't get back. And at that moment, I knew that I had arrived. And I had an open case, by the way, when I left. I was fighting a case when I came home 3 years ago, and I was facing 60 years for common notorious thief. I had 3 counts.
So that's tough love.
So my life changed, not because I had the open case, because when I had open cases, I committed more crime. It really didn't matter to me at that point. I wanted to do good, not just to show the prosecutor and the judge that I could change. This was for me. It was an I thing. So anything I did, I didn't to push the envelope with the judge, like, she's changed, look at all she's done. It was never for them. I did everything for me. And then first for God, I give him everything because I've believed in God since I was, then me, and then my daughter, she needed me and I needed to be there for her. So here I am. That's it.
Yeah. That's great. And so, we met at New Beginnings. What is your thought about the New Beginnings model, this, alternative housing and housing for those who are formerly incarcerated? Is this something that should be expanded?
It is. And, Stacy Borden has been a great friend of mine.
It's fantastic.
I get emails from different people saying, oh, Stacy said that I can talk to you. And I want to text her. I'm like, why do you send all these people? But I believe that her heart she has such a big heart, and she stood her ground on what she said that she was going to do when she came home. And she did it. I was just at an event at New Beginnings to celebrate the women who are doing well. And Kimya Faust is home. They fought for her to be home. Do you remember her mom was there speaking at the event? Well, she was home. And so
yes,
we're celebrating her and also celebrating the women who really are making a change in their own life, but also in the community. And although I looked at Stacy and she looks tired, like she needs a long vacation, but I know that she would open up 10 more houses if she could save thousands of women from ever entering the system. We need more of her, and we need more places like New Beginnings. We need more places like Kimya's house. We need those places for women to feel safe.
Absolutely. And there were a lot more of these type houses, up through the 90s, and then the sort of tough on crime era began, and a lot of them were closed down. We did provide an additional $500,000 in the budget that's on the governor's desk for more transitional housing to provide as grants. So I'm hoping to see those, throughout Massachusetts and communities. So.
Well, Senator, housing and mental health is the biggest challenge for formerly incarcerated. I think the two go hand in hand. If you don't have a place to live, you're stressed out. Um,
Yes.
You're stressed out when you come home, you don't have a job, and having a job is actually another component of that. But housing and mental health are the two biggest challenges that each individual who comes out of prison or jail face in today's society, whether we want to admit it or not. Each and every one of us, if you've ever done any time, I don't care if it was one day or 10 years, you need to speak to somebody about it. Nothing in there is normal. And what you see is not normal.
Absolutely. And what was the mental health care like in the prison system?
Well, the last time I went in, I really wasn't interested in mental health all the other times. I don't know, I was playing around. This time I went in and I put a 6 slip in the box. And normally the staff don't see you unless you are suicidal. I was determined. I put like 50,000 6 slips in, and a therapist came and saw me, and she goes, we're not really supposed to do this. Only if you're suicidal or you're on medication are we supposed to meet with you. She's like, but the look on your face is like you're so tired and you're determined to change something. So if you put in a 6 slip every other week, I'll put you on my calendar to see you. Not only did she stay true to that, but she also found me a therapist when I came home. Who I'm still in therapy. So if it wasn't for her, she's one out of every person that I've seen in Framingham that deals with mental health. They do not care. You have to literally have to try to commit suicide or commit suicide for people to pay attention. So the mental health there is not great at all. Or they want you to be medicated in order for them to see you. Oh, you need more meds? You want to sleep your time away? Do you want to not deal with anything? Okay, we'll give you some more meds. That's the type of mental health that with inside of those places.
And you interact at all? Did you interact at all with mental health counselors, or is it just COs, or what is the interaction like?
No, there's real mental health counselors. I saw a real mental health counselor and she was great.
Okay.
Yeah, they have those, and they have psychiatrists. There's doctors there. If they feel like you're more severe and that you could potentially harm yourself, you see a psychiatrist, and then you could get medication and all of those different things. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious. We do have a provision in the mental health law, which I'm cautiously optimistic will get to the governor soon, that would say that if you are in a serious mental health crisis, that you shall get treatment outside of the prison, at a hospital, at a psychiatric facility. And if a correction officer has a record of not being attentive to incarcerated people, they cannot be on suicide watch. That you only want to have correction officers who really care or really focus on the needs of the person with the mental health crisis, not those that might be indifferent to it. So
right, and that is actually excellent. I think that just touches the surface. I used to work in HSU in Framingham, where people are down there if they have mental health issues, if they're on suicide watch, and the women are in johnnies, so they're naked underneath those johnnies, and sometimes there's men watching them. And again, I have to say, keeping women safe, anybody who's in the system safe, is a priority. And to me, that doesn't seem safe. Another woman should be looking after a woman who is, on suicide watch, especially if there's no clothing. They basically have like a paper johnny. It's like a big, heavy quilted blanket, and you have nothing else. You have no underwears, no bra, nothing that you could harm yourself with. And they watch you and they don't move. So everything you do, including use the bathroom, they're watching you.
And if I may ask, did you spend time at MCI Framingham?
I did. I was in Framingham, and I used to work.
That's what I thought.
I was also in South Bay, and in both of those places, I've always worked, and they always gave me great jobs in there. Again, I for the most part didn't give anybody a hard time. I was already in enough trouble, but working in those areas, there are women there who have severe mental health issues that can only be addressed outside of the prison. And again, they think, oh, well, she's faking because, you know, she just wants to get outside of the jail. Oh, she doesn't feel good, she's faking because we're not going to take her to the hospital. You know, we're going to just treat them here. I feel like there needs to be more components to that. And, you know, a lot of times people don't really understand until they're in it. Like, you're a senator and you've never been incarcerated, but it seems like you're very invested in knowing how to, it's not about making an inmate or a prisoner comfortable. I think it's about drawing the line at respecting and saying, this person is here to do their time, so let them do it. Let them do whatever it takes to change their life so that they don't come back. Not be disruptive to their life as a CEO because you have that type of power. I don't think that that's fair to anybody.
Sure. And what, you know, there's lots of discussion about the future of MCI Framingham. Should it be closed? Should the approximately 180 women there move to a lower level facility, lower security, or home release, release on electronic monitoring? What is your view on MCI Framingham, which is the oldest women's prison in the country? It was built in the 1880s.
There's a lot of asbestos there, just so you know. I remember my first sentence. I slept on the top bunk, and the heat comes from the top bunk. That comes from the ceiling. The asbestos is in the ceiling. So you all this heat, you're also getting the exposure to the asbestos. And we were moved around, like, from unit to unit. They tried to treat it, and, you know, didn't even really scratch the surface. And when I went back just this last time, what happened is that the mods were closed down, and that's where the asbestos was. There was only one building open on the compound, and everything was closed. And then I think the administration said, oh, let's shut some people up and let's make an honors unit. That honors unit has asbestos in it. And you're putting people like lifers and people who have more than 2 years and behave themselves. And at one point, I had an 18-month sentence. I only served 10 months, and they were considering me. I said, I'll never, you can put me in the hole before you put me up there. I'm already, you know, you get very sick being in places like that. There's no real air and all of those different things. So I think that Framingham should have been closed down a long time ago. But again, it's all about profit.
Yep, absolutely. And if it's closed down, what would your recommendation be for the women that remain there?
You know, that is a good question. You know, Senator, I tell this to a lot of people, and I want people to understand, if they don't understand anything else. My podcast is not a reflection of if I think someone should go to prison or not. If I think that prison is for everybody, I do not. I think that, again, mitigating circumstances should play a part in every inmate that is in Framingham. If an inmate if a woman, I don't like to call them inmates or prisoners, or if a woman or a man could be home and not be a danger to their community or to society, get the help that they need, and people really gather around them to support them, because it's not easy, especially if you've been there for a long time. I think it is doable to put people in home confinement, or programs like Stacy, where they have an ankle monitor on and they have some real guidance. But to say that everybody should go free, I don't think that I have no heaven or hell to put people in, but sometimes maybe the community may not be safe for some people. I've run across some women who have severe mental health issues, and putting them back in the community when nothing has been dealt with because they've been more abused since they've been there, I think could be a detriment to people in the community. And that's just me being honest. But again, I want to see everyone free. I don't want to see people in prison. I feel like it's a modern day plantation to begin with.
Absolutely. And that power differential between correction officers and incarcerated people, very hard to change that dynamic. Yep, absolutely.
The dynamic of women who have been there for a life and are coming home. Like I said, Kimya Faust, she's home, but she's having a hard time mentally adjusting to her freedom. We want freedom so bad. We get a taste of it, and we're ready to go in our room and lock ourselves in when something doesn't appear right to us mentally, and we can no longer do that. So how do we create safe spaces for the men and women to come home and be mentally supported? It's not just about a physical freedom. Freedom is for inside out. And if you're not free up here, it doesn't matter if your skeleton is free. Nothing will ever change. You will go back to your old behaviors because it's all you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. And so what is the kind of support when someone is released that you would like to see from the government, from these reentry centers that do exist throughout the state? What is the support you'd like to see happen?
I think,
Best.
again, I think it's just like being an attorney. I have more lived experience. And I think sometimes
Mhm.
I understand people go to school for a career. And so they want to do this. They want to be a social worker. They want to be a corrections officer. And they're gung ho until they get there and someone pisses them off on the inside. And then they're calling them every name in the book. I think sometimes, hiring people with lived experience, there's more compassion.
Mhm.
More empathy, not so much sympathy, but there's more empathy for the person because you've been there before. It's easier for you to understand how they feel. You may not even agree with it, but being able to understand it and help them to navigate through. This is not textbook. A lot of women, if you do statistics, a lot of the women, 80% of the women, if you do statistics right now, or maybe a little bit more, have been molested by someone they trusted, raped by someone they trusted or loved, and physically abused. So we have trust issues to begin with. And then
Sure.
so you're going to take them out of this environment and have somebody read from a book, from a mental health book, and tell me how I feel about something. The last person that did that when I was a kid, my social worker, she called Boston police on me because I locked her in a room. You're not going to tell me how I feel because you don't have a clue how I feel to have my foster brother over here touching me. And every time I say something, you're going to tell me that I'm lying. You have no clue how that feels for me when I still love my mother and my father, although they didn't really appear to love me. I don't really know what looking at a book is going to do. Yeah, the law requires that I have to study all these law books and take the LSATs and do all that. My lived experience will put me in a position to really help my client because that's what they need. Even
Absolutely.
if nothing happens at that moment, if I can't free them at that moment, my love and compassion and my empathy for what I'm trying to do for them will outweigh anything that they're going through.
Absolutely. So what are recommendations for new institutions or new approaches to connect? You talked about lived experience. So I will say a program that EOPS has created or DOC has created is called Credible Messengers, where they've actually hired formerly incarcerated people to go into the prisons to interact with people a few months before their release and then help them adjust, outside of the walls. So I think that's a good start, but clearly there needs to be a lot more done. What are the institutions or what needs to be done outside of the prison setting to better support those who are formerly incarcerated? What would you have liked to seen when you were released?
I would like to have seen, I've already done my time and I don't want my quarry to beat me over the head every time I go to apply for a job. If I'm qualified, I'm qualified. I understand you can't work at a daycare if you have a charge for touching a child. I understand those things. So those are things that you want to see. But if I'm going to apply for a job and nothing on my record has anything to do with the job that I'm doing, why is it that I'm stopped at the door? I'm already stopped at the door because I have a quarry. You don't even need to know what's on it. I think that this is the biggest challenge that we face because, to be honest, financial literacy is not in our prisons. We only know the value of $1 if we stole before, if we were a drug dealer, because a lot of time I've read women's mail, they can barely even read and write. Education is such an important component to this, but also knowing the value of $1 and how to get a job and how to be effective and how to, start somewhere. We get the door closed in our faces so many times because the fact that we have a quarry. Why has this, first it was 7 years if you had a felony. Now it's 10 years.
Yep, exactly.
It's like, what are you doing? It's almost, see, the system is, the Commonwealth wants money. So this is not about whether you want us to win. You want people to come back in. A lot of officers have said to me, see you when you come back. I'll see you when you come back. And in fact, they were correct. But the offset to that is do we all have to really go back?
Mhm.
A lot of
Right.
our families have turned their backs on us. A lot of people, even people today in my life, it's been 3 years and people are still watching and waiting to see when I'm going to fail.
Mhm. I'm so sorry about that, Tawana. Yeah, that's gotta be very frustrating.
Support is very, very huge, not just because a lot of people don't have that support, but state legislation needs to take the lens off of their glasses, right? And see things for what they really are. The justice system is not just, it's the legal system. And it's not just for the Black and brown community. And let's talk about that. It's not.
Absolutely.
I
Mhm.
have been in prison with women who I'm doing 5 years and they're doing 18 months and they just ran somebody's kid over drunk driving and killed them.
Mhm. But they were white.
Of course.
Yep. Right.
So
Mhm. Absolutely.
we needed to support in the urban communities. Doing what Stacey Borden has done is amazing.
Mhm.
We don't
Mhm.
hear about her programs like hers often because, to be honest, they don't want us to know. They don't want us to know. And they definitely don't want us building those programs in those areas because then that means that we won't win. If we run into somebody like
Mhm.
Stacey, I love Stacey, but her mouth is big and she's not going to let you go until she stops you and kind of shakes some sense into you. And then she'll come back and be like, hey, didn't I know you from somewhere? If we had more of those in the community, kind of like when we were growing up, neighbor saw us doing something, we get our butt whooped. We go home and get a whooping too. There's none of that.
Mhm.
People don't want that
Mhm.
anymore. We don't hold each other accountable. We don't love each other the way that we should. And I feel like we already feel unlovable. We come from a place where we're told that, we're not worth anything, you'll be back, crackhead, dope fiend. Those are the things that you hear on a consistent basis. So when you leave, you're already thinking
Mhm.
these things. And if you have no support, where does it come from? You have a quarry that's going to stop you. You have to be on
Sure.
for mental health. You have to be on a list for housing. And God forbid you have a drug case. You're definitely not getting anything. So where
Mhm.
did that we really go? The system is not designed for us to win. It's a black hole. It's a sinking hole. It's designed for us to fail.
Yeah.
Never get out of it.
Well, well said. So you have, in my opinion, the past 3 years, you have won since you earned your freedom, and how are you feeling now, and what are your plans, say, for the next year? What is your vision for the next year?
My vision for the next year is to continue to do not your normal conversation and really let it grow, to see where it
Mhm.
goes, and to be more in the community. Of course, because you're my Facebook friend, that I have been sick and I've been in and out of the hospital, but I feel like that's
Yep.
just one component of where I want to be. Like being here today, I didn't physically feel good, but I knew it was important to share my story so that people know that it's not a no, it's a not yet. And it's not that you'll never be ready, it's that you need to get ready. And so for me, I'm always
Mhm.
preparing myself to go out and show people what it looks like for someone who is formerly incarcerated but can do this. I mean, people said she's just going to go to jail for life. 7 times I was incarcerated, whether it was county or prison. And so 7 is a number of completion in the Bible, if you did not know. And 7 was my last time. But what I want to do is really help people. I have a love for people. I think that there's more times that I'm in my bed saying, how can I have a lot of people that text me? I moved off of Mass and Cass and, I'm homeless and I don't want to use anymore. I'm under a bridge in Newton. I'm a diabetic. How can you help me get something for my sugar? And, there's been times where I would get up out of my bed and be like, I'm out. People like, why do you do that? Why do you care? I care because nobody cared about me.
Mhm. Right. Right. And you want to be there for people. Yep. Mhm.
This next year is just, I'm visiting some law schools next month. So I'm going to be
Mhm.
in law school soon, but more importantly, to just focus on I'm going to start visiting DYS soon. I'm waiting for my approval to
Mhm.
come back. Straight Ahead Ministries, they are looking for volunteers for people to go into the DYS and, fellowship with the young people there to give them hope, even if you just sit and play cards with them. And so I would love to get more people to do that, but I just want to be there for people. I want to give them some type of hope.
Sure.
I don't know what that really looks like, because I remember when I felt hopeless. I remember when I felt like people don't care. They're
Mhm.
never seeing a change in me. And then I stopped caring and I started to love myself enough to say, it just doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So I would love to open up a program. I would love to be a part of any program that will have me, where I can go and help
Yeah.
some, hug somebody, love somebody. So in the next year, I just plan to just really be authentic and transparent. My book will be out, so I'm sure I'll be somewhere speaking about
Great.
it. But more importantly, just finishing up school. Stacy enrolled me in Boston College Law School. There's a 12-week entrepreneurship program there. I did the
Incredible.
University entrepreneurship program and graduated last April. You know, I feel like I am overdoing it. And it's not because I'm trying to catch up. It's because I'm trying to catch people so they don't have to catch up.
Absolutely. Well, I love the vision, and what, whether it's leading a program or being an attorney to advocate for those who have had similar struggles. I'm very excited for you. And Tawana, I just want to say, since we first, met at that New Beginnings grand opening, I can tell you are transparent. You really want to help people. And I'm just so inspired by your work and honored to have met you. And thank you so much for coming on to my podcast after you invited me onto your podcast.
You're welcome. And did you get my cup? I sent you a mug. Did you get it?
I did. Yes, I got it. It's right here. Thank you so much.
Let me
Yep.
see it. I don't believe you. Let me. Have you used it? It's probably not even out of the box, Senator. I know.
It's not in the box. It's in the box. Yep. Yep.
You look guilty. See, I know these things. I think I might be a little bit tempted. But I just wanted
You
to.
get a lot of mugs.
I appreciate you. I love the work that you're doing. If you could ever involve me in anything that leads me to the community and to help other people, whether if you know a program that needs volunteers to sit with people, to bring them cosmetics, to do any of those things, please, feel free to have your assistant reach out to me. And I would love to be a part of anything that involves an enacting change for the community, and not just for people who are incarcerated. There's people who are suffering who have never seen the inside of a prison cell. This is for everybody. I want to see change.
Absolutely.
And I want to see growth.
Absolutely. Well, glad that your health is getting better. Wonderful to see you again. Hope to see you in person. And Tawana Bowles, student, activist, leader, really visionary. Honored to have you on. So I know we'll be talking very soon. And thanks for coming on. And thanks for those for watching another edition of Uplifting Voices. Please stay tuned. Take care. Thank you.